America making communist China great again. Will America's Work for Food Box program really make America great again? If America easily gave up the power to print its own currency, then how easily would America give up the power to grow and produce its own food? With the mass closure of grocery stores in the U.S. and mass grocery store openings in China, it should be clear now why there's a massive drop in U.S. population and a massive rise in China's population. China's appetite for food is growing exponentially. How do you feed 2 billion Chinese people, soon to be 3 billion? How are they eating? Why are American grocery stores disappearing, and grocery stores in China are appearing in ever-growing numbers? Where is food in the U.S. going? Why are American leaders feeding their people more drugs than food? Why are they exchanging EBT cards for guns? Why are American leaders so quick to stop feeding their people, but very slow to show any desire to stop gun violence? Why are American patriots more passionate about the government taking their guns than about taking their grocery stores, farmers' markets, and high-paying jobs? How soon before American patriots realize you can't eat the Second Amendment, and you can't eat $30 trillion in national debt? All these guns and so far not a single shot fired for food, hunger, or to keep a supermarket or grocery store from closing. Here is how it will end for many gun owners. Here is the resting place of the remains of a proud gun owner. Cause of death: starvation. He never saw it coming, so he never got a shot off. You can't eat a political or religious ideology, and you surely can't eat your party affiliation. We have lots of large gun protests, but where are the food protests? How soon before these gun protesters realize you can't eat gun laws either? Why is the U.S. economic news more focused on gun makers like Remington, Ruger, Mossberg, Smith & Wesson, Glock, and Beretta, than focusing on food companies like General Mills, Kellogg's, Hostess Bakery, Kroger's, and Winn-Dixie? We are literally being allowed to manufacture only enough guns to kill ourselves, and not one more than that. And we are being allowed to distribute just enough food to the shrinking American population to starve them of nutrition, energy, spirit, and the will to wake up and fight back, and not one sandwich more than that. Is the reason the U.S. military can barely feed 1 million soldiers is because China needs to feed 30+ million troops? How soon before investors wake up to the fact that you can't eat Bitcoin, silver, gold, or oil? How is China getting the food out the U.S.? Wherever the Chinese go, they must grab all the food-producing land, food production corporations, they can get their hands on. Are U.S. troops all spread out overseas because it is more difficult to defend America's food in foreign lands? Food war equals population war. China overtakes U.S. as world's biggest grocery market. Food shopping in China worth £607 billion at end of 2011, against America's £572 billion, and forecast to approach £1 trillion by 2015. This Walmart supercenter in Jinan, Shandong Province, IGD estimates that international grocery retailers could open more than 2,700 stores in China over the next 4 years. China has overtaken the United States to become the world's biggest market for grocery shopping, according to the latest report to underscore the country's growing global economic dominance. Driven by a growing population, a move to more expensive foods and robust economic growth, the U.S. market slipped to second place. The researchers forecast that China's market will grow at twice the pace of the U.S. to be worth £918 billion by 2015. China's grocery growth story is phenomenal. China is a crucial growth market for many of the world's largest grocery retailers. Even beyond the major cities, there are huge opportunities. Forecasts suggest there will be over 200 Chinese cities with a population of over 1 million by 2025. Over the next decade, China will overtake the U.S. on a number of indicators, he said, noting that more than 50% of the world's population lives in the region. Chains such as Tesco have already been expanding in emerging markets. The UK-based retailer opened in China in 2004 and now runs more than 100 stores there, while also pushing online sales and opening a number of shopping malls. IGD estimates that international grocery retailers could open more than 2,700 stores in China over the next 4 years, around 13 a week. The Chinese government is taking steps to steer the economy to a more consumption-led growth model with measures to boost incomes, improve the social welfare system and increase access to consumer credit, said Denny Finch. And as disposable incomes grow, Chinese consumers will be increasingly willing to buy premium groceries. So there you have it. Not only is China pushing online sales, but it is also building and opening malls and supermarkets. While in the U.S., the media has convinced Americans that malls and supermarkets are no longer relevant in an online world. Therefore, our malls and supermarkets are being torn down and abandoned. China is a perfect case study in what population explosion looks like. But to see what advanced stages of depopulation looks like, you need only to take a look at the U.S. When a Chinese firm bought the world's largest pork producer, Smithfield Foods, 2 years ago, critics worried about U.S. employment, food safety and other issues. The community of Smithfield, Virginia, is surrounded by farms and cornfields, and corn feeds the pigs that the company turns into all kinds of fresh and packaged meat products. John Edwards, publisher of the Smithfield Times, says the biggest worry was that the company might move its operations, and thousands of jobs, elsewhere, devastating this community of 8,000. It had to do with the fact that China is a communist country. People didn't trust the idea of China owning our biggest industry. Is this the food war that cannot be televised? Is it the population war that's banned from television? Why was Obama not allowed to push reproduction policies and reproductive lifestyles? Why is Trump not allowed to feed American citizens and soldiers the surplus food it produces? Why are Americans not allowed to have malls and supermarkets, but the Chinese are? Why is it that immediately after President Trump met with the Chinese President Xi Jinping, he returned to the White House to push through a budget with massive cuts to EBT, food stamps, welfare, healthcare, and subsidized housing? Why is Trump forcing Americans into food pantries and food lines? Why does it look like another American president is willingly sacrificing his remaining people so that a competing nation can live, reproduce, and thrive? 4 million people dropped off the food stamp rolls in 1 month, according to the latest numbers on food stamp enrollment from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The latest USDA data show that the number of participants in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the government program that administers food stamps, dropped from 45.7 million in October 2017 to 41.7 million in November 2017, a staggering decrease of 4 million over 1 month. Even though there was a temporary spike in enrollment, mostly concentrated in a few states that caused the national average of food stamp enrollment to spike, nationwide enrollment in the program as a whole is still on a steady decline. The sharp decline in food stamp enrollment over 1 month reflects how states like Florida have curtailed their temporary food stamp benefit programs for those affected by natural disasters. But it also highlights an ongoing downward trend in food stamp enrollment that has been going on for several years since state legislatures enacted welfare reform measures designed to get people back into the workforce. The Trump administration announced that it would adopt some of these state welfare reform measures, such as requiring food stamp recipients to work a certain number of hours per week, and implement them at the federal level, causing nationwide food stamp enrollment to plunge even further. Over the past year since President Donald Trump took office, enrollment in SNAP dropped by 2 million. The latest food stamp numbers show that the downward trend over the past year, and every year after 2013, is continuing. West Dayton residents fill a shopping center parking lot where their neighborhood grocery once operated. The West Dayton Aldi closed earlier this month, and now a local food pantry is stepping in to help. Wherever people are struggling to find food in the Dayton area, you'll likely find God's Grace Food Pantry. They're a local non-profit pantry that serves hundreds of people wherever they set up shop. You don't have to look far to see the problem here. People filling the West Town shopping center doing what they need to survive. The city of Dayton doesn't get it. The state of Ohio doesn't get it. Resident Mary Ann Perry doesn't want to be here. She's getting by but doesn't have the resources to seek out the closest grocery store. It's about 4 miles away. Collectively, the Miami Valley is a food desert, meaning there's poor access to food, let alone healthy food options. God's Grace secured a temporary lease to distribute food directly in front of where Aldi used to be. God's Grace Food Pantry served more than 1,000 people this evening in West Dayton. President Donald Trump's proposals to cut eligibility for food stamps in 2018 would hit hard on thousands of military families who receive the benefit, the Pentagon said Tuesday. It's a very unfortunate situation, Army Lieutenant General Anthony R. Ierardi, the Pentagon's Joint Staff Director for Force Structure, Readiness and Assessment, said of the difficulties of troops who have to resort to food stamps. Ierardi did not immediately have an estimate on how many troops were on food stamps, but said he had personally dealt with the problem of families struggling to meet their dietary needs in a previous post as a division commander. He said the military would seek to mitigate the impact on families if the proposed cuts to the food stamp program were approved by Congress. In a White House briefing Monday on the budget, Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney indicated that the Trump administration was ready to press a crackdown on eligibility for food stamps and other benefits as part of sweeping cuts on federal anti-poverty programs. Mulvaney said that more low-income Americans would need to work to qualify for benefits. If you are on food stamps, and you are able-bodied, we need you to go to work, Mulvaney said. Although members of the military now eligible for food stamps already have a full-time job in defense of the nation. We believe in the social safety net in the Trump administration. We really do, said Mulvaney, a former Republican representative from South Carolina. The White House estimated that changes to the SNAP, better known as food stamps, would save $193 billion over 10 years. Representative Mac Thornberry, Republican Texas, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, acknowledged the plight of troops who have to turn to food stamps. There shouldn't be anyone who falls into that category in the military, but they absolutely can be eligible for food stamps, Thornberry said. Congress had a responsibility to make sure that troops received adequate pay to avoid going on food stamps, Thornberry said. Under questioning at the Pentagon briefing Tuesday, Ierardi and John Roth, who was performing the duties of the Under-Secretary of Defense, Comptroller, were in the uneasy position of arguing for major increases in military spending that would be offset by cuts in social programs for the poor, some of which benefit military families. The first Easy Way store opened in the Memphis area way back in 1932. Over the years, the business grew to a chain of 7 stores. Lexington is losing another grocery. Lucky's Market is closing in May after only 2 years, according to the company. The store is expected to close by May 26th, or when everything is sold. The Colorado-based grocery chain opened its store at 1030 South Broadway in January 2016, promising organic produce for the 99%. Based on a model similar to Whole Foods, Aldi, or Trader Joe's, with lots of quality house brand products, Lucky's hope to carve into the crowded field of Lexington supermarkets dominated by Kroger. The chain announced plans to close a store in Ellisville, Missouri, in August 2017. In 2016, Kroger bought a meaningful investment in Lucky's Market. Financial terms of the transaction were not disclosed, but both chains predicted that it would help them expand territory, including into Florida, where Lucky's had stores but Kroger didn't. Lucky's Market is the second natural grocery to attempt to crack the Lexington market and fail. In June 2017, Fresh Thyme closed after less than a year. Good Foods Co-op, a locally owned organic and natural grocery, also has announced declining sales and said the store may have to move from its longtime Southline Drive location. A planned IGA store for Romney Road in a former Kroger has been on hold with Cox Foods out of the deal. Closures of Jacksonville grocery stores could create food desert. It's something we all take for granted, having easy access to food. But the closing of 4 local grocery stores is leaving thousands of people with nowhere to shop. No choice but to walk, said Joseph Stokes, who is one of 5,000 people living in the 32254 zip code area who are considered food insecure, without sufficient access to affordable nutritious food. And many of them, like Stokes, have to walk or take a bus to get to the grocery store. Now Stokes and thousands of other families will have to find another place to get their food after Southern Grocers decided to close 4 local stores, including the Harveys on Edgewood. Castillo said the closest grocery store for neighbors will now be the Save-A-Lot, about 1.5 miles away. We are fast approaching the event horizon of fight for our food rights and our reproductive rights, or die. It will soon not be a question of what we eat, but a question of when we eat. But a food war won't go nuclear, because you can be certain that no intelligent superpower that requires massive amounts of food and water will want to turn good fertile farmland into a radioactive wasteland. A grocery store food desert, yes. But a radioactive farming wasteland, no. Therefore, any nuclear exchange between food-producing superpowers would have to be either faked, or somehow contained so as not to spread contamination to any essential food and water sources. This is why the Soviet Union was defeated without dropping a single nuclear bomb. So why did the Soviet military simply surrender without a fight? And where are they today? Did they just disappear? Let's save that for another unsolved mystery. This begs the question, are China's leaders smarter than our American leaders? Which population is more likely to be growing and eating tomorrow, and which is more likely to be vanishing or starving? Take a look at President Trump's budget, and ask yourself, how do you make America great again by taking food off its tables, and not feeding and housing your own people? While your adversary is literally repossessing your unwanted food and water to cover your borrowing, and feed his exploding population growth. Trump's budget will severely cut food assistance, expand military spending, and raise the national debt by an amazing 50%. This means brace yourself for less food access, and more gun access, less nutrition, and more mental illness and addiction, more drug overdoses, more gun violence, more horrific mass crime events. Food health equals mental health. Smart food is nutrient-rich. Dumb food is nutrient-poor. We are what we eat, and dumb or dead when we don't eat at all, or don't eat right. When you realize you're at war, you must know that food, military preparedness, and larger population numbers are not choices, they are necessities. Food and numbers are essential to military readiness. Remember this next time you review a national budget, or select national leadership, because we're going to need every able-bodied, well-fed, well-nourished man and woman we can activate for military service. Therefore, the military draft is also not a choice, it's a national necessity. Subway is in a downward spiral. The sandwich chain's U.S. store count dropped by 900 locations in 2017, according to figures that a Subway representative provided to Business Insider. That represents more than 3% of the chain's 2016 U.S. stores. The chain has 26,000 shops opened and operating in the U.S., according to the representative, compared with more than 27,000 at the end of 2016. In 2016, sales at the chain reportedly fell 1.7%, and its store count dropped by 359 locations in the U.S., marking the first time in the company's history that the chain closed more stores than it opened. Subway restaurants, the world's most ubiquitous dining chain, will continue closing U.S. stores. After peppering the nation with thousands of locations, closely held Subway is retrenching. This year, the sandwich purveyor is planning to shut about 500 more of its U.S. shops. Last year, more than 800 stores went dark, with the total U.S. count dropping to 26,000. It also closed restaurants in 2016. Subway's CEO is leaving the struggling sandwich chain. Suzanne Greco, who is the sister of the chain's late co-founder, Fred DeLuca, announced on Wednesday that she is retiring as CEO. Dunkin' Donuts CEO Nigel Travis said the inability to retain employees is the biggest challenge facing his industry this year. Fast food chains could be in danger in the coming months. The restaurant industry is engaging in a turf battle as fears over store closures increase. Rising labor costs, changing millennial tastes, and too many choices means the industry is more competitive than ever before. It's kind of like treading water and fearing something bad will happen, one industry expert told Business Insider. One thing is almost certain, some restaurants are going to have to close. A fast food problem, where have all the teenagers gone? I've never seen the industry in this kind of situation, said Robert S. Golden, a partner at the food consulting firm Intellect. It's never been like this. An analysis by Credit Suisse analyst Robert Moscow found that the top 25 U.S. food and beverage companies have lost an equivalent of $18 billion in market share since 2009. I would think of them like melting icebergs, he says. Every year they become a little less relevant. Of the top 10 U.S. food and beverage manufacturers of 2015, number 9, Smithfield Foods is a leading consumer packaged meats company. The company is also the world's largest pork processor and hog producer. The feds have finally found a war they can convincingly win. It's called the Food Trafficking War, also known as the War on Corporate Food Bootleggers and Food Lords. The mission is to shut down food traffickers and food dealers before poor people start illegally overdosing on MSG, GMO, steroids, carcinogens, complex sugars, plastic fillers, and infertility enhancers. These food traffickers and dealers must be stopped before the children eat again. Imagine the horror of young victims of a mass school shooting dying on a full stomach. By the way, has that sandwich been properly accounted for, scanned, tagged, RFID, cataloged, and modified for consumption? Wow, when did I wake up in the movie Soylent Green? Food stamp fraud check ignores red flags that weren't programmed to profile organized, privileged white-collar criminals. Therefore, these privileged white-collar bandits were able to evade detection until after successfully stealing over $500 million from food stamp fraud. Now, that's impressive. These boys and girls will be shut down, brought in for debriefing, given some recreational time off, and later reassigned to a new mission. Or maybe, TMZ can recycle these felons into a hit piece titled, America's White-Collar Criminals Got Talent. Never let a $500 million reality TV entertainment opportunity go to waste.